They brought cranes from 3 states, steel cables as thick as your arm, and 24 workers to move monuments twice its size. The Rosary Hill statue of Our Lady didn't move after 70 years.
Heroin.
Some call it miraculous. Some call it a curse. On Kentucky's St. Mary's Creek's highest point, a calm, overlooked town with maple-lined roads and undulating pastures. From miles away, the white marble Virgin Mary with arms extended and eyes dropped appears to have seen every sunrise and storm since she arrived. She's more than a statue to the locals. She guards a rock-solid promise. Their joys, griefs, infants, and deaths have fallen at her feet. They've whispered for generations, "Don't touch the lady on the hill." Nobody recalls who put her there. At least not similarly. Old Martha Grady thought the Irish immigrant family returned from battle with faith and a debt to God. Pastor Jim remembers the parish priest when the town had daily mass and all men in the county wore suits to church. Teens who sneak up there on summer evenings say she's always been there, like the hill. Despite their differences, the stories led to one belief. A woman chose this area and is staying. Plans followed. City council sessions behind closed doors, slick brochures. The idea was elegantly named St. Mary's Spiritual Retreat and Resort. Faith-based tourism in a poor area is the goal. One line was printed so little most people missed it. Move statue to make room for access road. A whisper at Tony's Diner over black coffee started the leak. By Friday, all Main Street shops were talking. By Sunday, Father Brennan couldn't get through Mass without seeing his parishioners' restless, piercing eyes. Half the town saw an opportunity to recover from decades of economic stagnation. The other half felt a frigid dread, the feeling you get when something sacred is going to be violated. After then, stories began. The architecture student who measured the foundation thought the monument fell onto his drawings, not the earth. Then, a Cincinnati contractor slipped on the statue's first step and shattered his wrist, even though the stone was dry. The bell rumors followed. Several residents said they heard a deep, sluggish bronze church bell tolling once. No bell has rung on Rosary Hill. The first crane arrived in town to a tiny throng at the hill's foot. Nobody shouted or held signs. They stood with hands in pockets and eyes up. Some whispered prayers. Some glared at the statue, daring it to blink. Even resort supporters felt uneasy. Discussing statuary removal was one thing. Watching guys attach cold steel to her shoulders was another. That morning, the east wind brought the aroma of unrealized rain. Almost 70 years after placing a chipped limestone at the statue's foot, Martha Grady crossed herself and whispered, "If you save us, we'll keep you here forever." Most didn't hear her, but those who did would remember what happened next, changing Rosary Hill's image in this town and beyond. St. Mary's Creek residents disagree on how the lady got on Rosary Hill. Some bits, passed down through generations, whispered in kitchens, and replayed at church potlucks, construct a story that has outlived its creators. The year was 1949. America was still recovering from the war. Clapboard dwellings, one general store, a tool shed-sized post office, and the old St. Brendan's Church at the bottom of the hill comprised the town then. That winter, Kentucky had a rare blizzard in decades. Heavy rain, ice, and wind can split electricity poles. The town feared a total flood on the third night when the Ohio River rose to its banks. Without warning, the wind changed. Storm path curved completely around hill. Floodwaters vanished as swiftly as they rose. Some termed it lucky. Others termed it something different. Pacific veteran Patrick O'Connell and his wife Eileen were among them. The typhoon occurred on the day they learned their youngest son, MIA in Okinawa, was alive and returning home. Not a coincidence for them. A sign. Eileen told her neighbors that night over a pot of beef stew on the stove. "We owe her a promise. She saved our boy and she saved this town. We'll keep her here where everyone can see her watching over us." By spring, preparations were formed. No permits, committees, or architects, just guys with shovels and women with casseroles to feed them. Children laughed while carrying buckets of gravel up the dirt walk, slipping in the mud. One slab of marble from a quarry 2 counties away was donated by a Catholic congregation that couldn't afford renovations. Carlo Mancini, an unemployed stone cutter who has carved saints for Chicago basilicas, did the work for gratis. He labored silently in an open-air shack at the hill's foot for weeks. Chisel hitting stone was his lone companion. People say he prayed under his breath with every cut, But no one could hear him. After Mary's flowing robes, eyes downcast, arms open statue was finished, the town came to visit her on the hilltop. Just after sunrise, men assembled her pieces like a religious puzzle as they climbed the mountainside. Each family gave stones, part of their land, hearth, and history, to the base. Under all that, Eileen O'Connell placed a folded paper into the foundation. After decades, the wind and rain wore the mortar thin enough to disclose the paper's words. "If you save our town, we'll keep you here forever." Rosary Hill's woman became more than stone and marble. She appeared in every life narrative. The night before graduation, high school seniors left corsages and future notes. War widows sat on the stone steps when their grief overwhelmed them. For her blessing, farmers left fall baskets of maize and apples. Then came the inexplicable moments. A solitary candle burning all night in January without wax dropping. A hawk that circled the hill for 3 days before leaving. A girl who went missing during a summer picnic was found unharmed, dry, and smiling near the statue's base 2 hours later, even though the searchers thought they had located her. Miracle or myth, St. Mary's Creek was woven with legends. By the time outsiders discussed moving the statue, it felt more like a suggestion to rip out the town's heart than a public works decision. The elderly will tell you the lady is older than the street lighting, longer than the paved road into town and some hilltop trees. Ask the younger ones, and they may shrug until you watch them pass past the statue and witness their subconscious peek up to check if she's still there. St. Mary's Creek's pulpit doesn't always preach faith. It may be engraved in stone, standing against the wind on a hill that won't give up. It began quietly, as most small-town storms do, behind doors few residents ever enter. The St. Mary's Creek City Council held a special planning session in the Masonry Municipal Facility on Main Street under fluorescent lights. Public wasn't invited. A slideshow showed designs of St. Mary's Spiritual Retreat and Resort, a shiny new project. Rosary Hill changed on screen. A paved drive with attractive cherry trees replaced the dirt route. A glass-wall visitor center topped the mountain. At the property's border near the parking lot, the artist's digital sunlight illuminated Our Lady's white marble monument. For the first time in 70 years, a leader recommended relocating her. The council and development team saw it as obvious. Tour bus accessibility, visibility, convenience. They wanted to preserve the lady's history in a better place. However, that one decision in the footnotes of a slick proposal would match dried timber. The first to know weren't a council member or journalist. Lisa Torres, a young mother working as a part-time planning office clerk, saw the relocation line while scanning documents for filing. Over breakfast the next day, she told her aunt. That nightfall, the news spread around town. Tony's Diner regulars whispered across the counter. Old farmers shook their heads in amazement during their coffee break at the grain co-op. Everyone feared it, even though no one saw it coming. Outsiders may predict split reactions, but not. Some saw chance. "This place is dying," auto shop owner Frank Dwyer mumbled, wiping his hands on a cloth. A resort like that could bring jobs, bring life back to Main Street. Others shuddered. "You move her, you move the blessing," said Ruth Kelly, who still carried lilies up the hill every Friday. "And when the blessing leaves, nothing good follows." The gap was obvious by Sunday Mass. Younger couples talked about property values and how tax revenue may help their kids get into better schools on one side of the church steps. On the other hand, senior parishioners clasped rosaries closer, examining the hill at the distance to ensure the lady was still there. Pastor Brennan listened to both sides and followed his advice, although he stayed longer than usual at the altar rail after service, praying inaudibly. The fence-sitters didn't know what to trust but felt the town was on thin ice. Conversation overflowed into front yards and kitchen tables at night. Teens hanging out near the baseball field debated if moving the statue would break the enchantment, or if it was just a rock. Martha Grady, who was at the nursing home where the lady was placed, told everyone that heaven-bound promises shouldn't be changed. Tension was quiet. It simmered. Without protests or picket placards, individuals looked at each other differently across the grocery aisle. The first defiance followed. A tiny group of 8 persons walked Rosary Hill with candles one Tuesday evening. Their flames flickered as they knelt at the statue's base. They didn't talk or chant. They lingered until the wax burnt low, then left silently. Next night the group doubled. In a week, 30 individuals prayed on the hill under the stars. though no one called it a protest. It was quieter and more certain. Developers sent surveyors in polos and baseball caps with clipboards and laser measurements. They hiked the slope, took photos, and questioned when was this foundation poured? And any record of a permit for this? The municipality bristled. Prayer had never required a permit. Ruth Kelly was still standing with her lilies when a surveyor approached. "Ma'am, do you know if there's any documentation for how this statue got here?" said. Ruth smiled weakly. "Yes," she said. "It's written in stone." She left. Information about that transaction traveled almost as fast as the relocation. The community was now divided into two camps. The first, largely young business owners and newcomers, demanded reform. The feeling alone couldn't sustain a town. The second, anchored in generations-old households, believed value wasn't dollar-based. Rosary Hill remained unaffected. The lady stared at the town below, arms outstretched, marble face calm, as if she'd seen this conflict before and knew how it would end. Under that quiet, something was shifting like a pre-storm breeze. A change that makes people look over their shoulders on an empty street and warns you what's next won't be normal. He didn't believe in signs when the first sign appeared. Senior architecture student Tyler Grant interned with development. His task was simple: measure the statue base, take photos, and submit a relocation platform plan. On his second morning at St. Mary's Creek, he climbed Rosary Hill with a pill and a half-empty cappuccino. Mid-September was a typical day with a warm sun and a few clouds. He crouched, ran the laser measurer along the pedestal, and mumbled about shoddy original work. Tyler had a dream in the motel room the developers had booked for him that night of the statue tumbling forward in one solid piece. It crushed the plans he printed earlier that night. He woke at 3:33 a.m. As if the room had thinner air, the dream left his shirt damp with sweat and his chest tight. Tyler requested a downtown survey site the next morning. Why wasn't stated? The second sign was less subtle. 2 days later, Cincinnati contractor Bill Parsons inspected the slope for equipment installation. From Civil War cannons to granite memorial arches, Bill has lifted big objects for 30 years. His boot slipped on the hill's first step, a huge limestone slab weathered by decades. The stone was dry as bone, but he fell hard and broke his wrist. "That's just bad footing," the foreman told reporters. But others who were there said the air had grown cooler for a breath and every bird in Maple Grove went silent. The bell rang. It was Friday night, still light enough to see the West Hills. Ruth Kelly was arranging lilies at the statue base when she heard 3 slow tolls from above. The loud metallic sound hung in the air longer than expected. She looked up, partly anticipating a quip about a portable speaker. There was no bell, no tower. Only the open sky and the faint fragrance of rain, albeit no storm was visible. 6 others reported hearing it by Sunday, always in threes at dusk. The abnormalities continued. Pastor Brennan, who rarely shares his visions, told a Louisville colleague that he had woken up to see a faint blue light slowly moving around the statue. Not a flashlight or phone's flickering glare. He approached the window and it winked out after drifting steadily and circularly. Teens who climbed up the hill for late-night dares returned silent. One youngster admitted to seeing a white woman a few feet from the monument, her hair blowing in the wind despite the calm air. Martha Grady, too feeble to ascend the hill, told her nurse from the nursing home that the lady had closed her eyes 3 nights in a dream. Developers said certain accounts may be explained away. Visual illusions, hyperactive imaginations, brains that connect dots where none exist. The discomfort at St. Mary's Creek persisted despite explanations. Weather on the hill appeared weird, increasing discomfort. On an unusually warm October afternoon, the surveying crew reported chilly wind gusts that rattled measuring poles and knocked over clipboards. Only 50 yards down the slope, the air was still and warm. Jamie Russell carried her 2-year-old up the hill to plant chrysanthemums for her late grandfather one morning. About halfway up, the boy laughed and pointed to the empty spot beside the statue. "Lady's hand," he said. Jamie dismissed it until she noticed his small palm was warm, like if someone had held it, despite the frigid air. That night, she told her husband, who told his brother, who told 3 more bar patrons. By Saturday, the tale was widespread. Despite concerns, the project timeframe didn't change. Developers said the move will be on time. Local officials called the instances coincidental, But workers grew wary. Gus, a crane operator who had spent much of his career moving bridge spans across state lines, told a hardware shop friend that he had headaches every time he went upward. "Not like normal headaches," he said, stroking his temple. "Feels like someone standing right behind me, just staring." Even project supporters began to discreetly confess that maybe it wasn't worth tempting whatever forces were stirring. About 40 townspeople gathered at the hill's foot one night without a plan. Some held candles, while others watched the statue with their hands in their coat pockets. They didn't speak, but the silence was so complete they could hear the creak a half-mile away. Then 3 slow bell tolls rolled down the slope, faint but undeniable. Some gasped. Another murmured, "She's warning us." Nobody moved for nearly a minute. After being asked what the warning meant, they said we shouldn't move her, that something horrible will happen, or that it may be too late. Every answer had the same feeling regardless of meaning. The Rosary Hill lady no longer guarded the town. She spoke to it silently. The town was listening whether it wanted it or not. First try. A crisp Monday morning in late October. Rosary Hill appeared serene and disinterested from afar as the sun rose clear and the air was silent. At its base, the scene was unusual. A 3-story crane sat next to 2 flatbed trucks. Steel cables snaked on the ground. Hard-hatted men moved with the clipped accuracy of 100 repeat performers. This was just another duty for the workers. It was the moment St. Mary's Creek residents feared. A small crowd gathered at the slope bottom by 8 a.m. No signs, no shouts, just mute witnesses. Some held coffee mugs, others rosaries. Some stood with arms folded and faces blank. Foremen yelled orders. Cables were carried uphill over shoulders. 2 knots were checked while workers secured them around the statue's base. Engineering-wise, it should have been easy. Marble weighed little under 2 tons, which the crane could handle. The crane engine started at 8:27. The statue didn't move when the cable tightened and the boom arm ascended. The operator grimaced, relaxed the settings, and pulled harder. The steel groaned, the tension gauge rose, and one of the main cables snapped, slamming into the dirt. Laborer stumbles backward, narrowly avoiding a fall-down slope. After cursing, the foreman shut down the site for inspection and informed the crowd they'd return the next day. It was less public the second time. The crew returned with heavier cables around sunrise on Tuesday. An additional winch truck was brought in with the crane. Lifting and pivoting the statue onto a flatbed was the goal. Only a few residents knew about the unannounced start this time. Again, the cables were secured and signaled. The statue remained anchored as the winch motor grumbled and the crane tilted slightly forward. The only thing moving was the winch truck, whose tires sank an inch as if drawing back. Operator turned off electricity. Though the ground was dry and stable, some workers looked unhappy and mumbled about dead weight and weak footing. Developers became impatient after 3 attempts. Thursday morning brought another crane, a larger crew, and a heavy-load lowboy trailer. Excavate around the base, release the foundation, and elevate. The backhoe bucket dug into the ground beside the pedestal first. 10 inches below, the machine shook fiercely. The operator said he felt the bucket kick back like it hit something alive. A thunderous crack split the air seconds later, freezing the hydraulic arm. Thin hydraulic fluid hissed onto the soil, collecting at the operator's boots. Work ceased again. Check tools, replace parts. Nobody in the mechanism explained the sudden failure. Rumors outpaced machines by now. Whispers circulated about 3:33 a.m. Dreams tolling bell, cold wind that never reached town below. Fourth effort never got past setup. The weather changed Saturday morning halfway through lifting the straps. No clouds, no warning. A sudden gust of air threw paper blueprints down the slope like startled birds. Headwear rattled. Some workmen left the statue, stating the wind was colder than ice water. "Let's get it done," the foreman screamed. Never got the chance. A single bolt of lightning struck the earth less than 15 feet from the statue base without thunder or rain. A thunderous blast and blinding glare. One man kneeled, hands over ears. Others slumped backward, uninjured but pallid. The operator heard the foreman say, "Shut it down now." Heavy equipment was moved into trailers that afternoon. The developers told the local daily they were experiencing technical challenges and would examine safety standards before continuing work. But everyone on the hill that week knew better. The team were reluctant to attempt again. The crane operator requested relocation out of state. After a welder quit, the statue remained as it had been. Arms open, gaze lowered, marble surface unblemished, as if the steel cables had never touched her. Town residents didn't party. No cheers or triumphal speeches, just silent nods between neighbors and a few more candles at her feet. Ruth Kelly carried a bouquet of flowers down the slope alone one evening. She bent down a few feet from the base and dusted dirt from the foundation edge. Someone murmured something no one could hear. She smiled weakly as she descended the hill, according to witnesses. That smile may signify comfort or danger, depending on who asked. Most news sources dismissed St. Mary's Creek calls as small-town drama. No, not Louisville's Courier-Ledger, recognized for its human interest stories. Ethan Cole entered the story that way. Ethan was still the newsroom kid at 28. Smart, ambitious, and pessimistic. He was known for debunking urban tales like mold-infested haunted houses and miracle cures that were just renamed vitamins. Ethan cocked an eyebrow when his editor pushed a tiny file across the desk. 3 printed emails, a few Rosary Hill cell phone photos. A statue they can't move, he remarked. You want me to cover that? Leaned the editor. I want you to find the truth. Write it up. Kill the myth. That's your specialty, okay? Ethan drove into town on Thursday afternoon. A camera bag in the passenger seat, sunglasses in his collar, and a blue button-down with rolled sleeves. A sleepy village clinging to a relic, eager for attention was his expectation. He found it quieter and heavier than expected. The main street has boarded and open brick storefronts. People strolled slowly, eyes turning toward the hill almost unconsciously. From half a mile distant, the statue seemed to anchor the horizon. His earliest interviews were pleasant but guarded. Carla, Tony's diner's waitress, served his coffee and answered inquiries half-smiling. You can write whatever you want, hun, remarked. A retired farmer warned at the grain co-op. But don't make fun of her. Believe it or not. Nobody tried to convince him of miracles. No one put images in his face. The municipality seems to have decided their mission was to make sure he understood the bounds, not convert him. Ethan stayed in town's only motel the first night. He checked his hill footage from different perspectives. At minute 7 of the second reel, something white and rapid flickered behind the statue, like fabric catching light. Freezing the frame, he zoomed. Could have been glare or nothing. The next morning he climbed Rosary Hill alone. Air was cold, grass moist. He wrote down information in his notepad near the statue's base. Worn marble, faint chisel lines on the robe's folds, and a hairline fissure that seemed deeper than it should be. He was joined by an elderly wool-coated woman halfway through his sketch notes. You're the reporter, she said without asking. Ethan nods. What will you write about her? Still figuring that out, he said. After a long look, she remarked. Don't write to prove, write to listen. The lady doesn't need defending. She just needs understanding. And she walked down the hill silently. Ethan prepared a drone fly to photograph the statue that night. Clear skies, low wind, perfect weather. 15 seconds into the climb, the live feed froze. The drone plummeted from the skies when its battery drained from 86% to 0 in an instant. Nothing was broken when he arrived, save the battery read full for some reason. His sleep was poor. At 3:33 a.m., a powerful bell-like sound woke him up. He approached the window. The moonlight barely illuminated Rosary Hill, but the statue's 70-year-old silhouette was clear. Ethan gave up on categorizing the town's discomfort by the 4th day. He took notes and recorded, but his queries varied. Why nobody wanted marble moved, not how to move it. He walked the hill in the late afternoons till the light became blue. Others left flowers or lit candles. Sometimes it was just him and the statue. Skepticism was still there, but it was being replaced with a feeling he couldn't name. That this location and the lady were more than story and stone. Whether he liked it or not, he was becoming part of the story. Carla, the diner waitress, directed Ethan to her. Last house on Willow Lane, she remarked, pouring his coffee. Martha Grady, 91, was small but steady-eyed. She sat on that porch like she was sculpted there, covered in a knitted shawl, watching the hill like some people watch the ocean. When Ethan came, she didn't question who or why. She pointed to the empty chair near her. You want to know where she came from? Said. Not a question, he indicated. Martha studied Rosary Hill for a while before speaking. The breeze ruffled her scarf. She said. It was the winter of '49, low but clear. We had each other and that hill, the county's highest point, from which you could see the river 30 miles away on clear days. In January a storm should have drowned them. Days of rain, ice thick enough to crack tree limbs, wind that howled like it was tearing the sky apart. The river rose too fast, and everyone knew it would spill over in hours. Martha leaned forward, clasping her hands. Suddenly it stopped. Wind moved, water dropped, and storm rolled east. The next morning, you could walk to the outskirts of town and see where the flood had been heading for us before turning away. She hesitated, letting the memory sink in. People called it luck, but not Eileen O'Connell. The night the storm turned, Eileen told everyone that they owed the Blessed Mother a promise. If you saved our boy and you saved our town, she said, then we'll keep you here forever. She and her husband Patrick were one of the few Irish immigrant families in town. Their son had just returned from the war alive after months missing. No licenses, no fundraising drives, just neighbors dragging stone and timber up the slope. Carlo Mancini, a stonemason out of employment and out of alternatives, did the job for gratis. He was an artist, Martha remarked gently. He didn't talk much, but when he carved her face it was like he already knew her. The statue went up in spring, and the whole town gathered at the base. Men in Sunday suits, women in dresses, children holding whatever flowers they could find. Every family brought a stone to place in the foundation, a piece of themselves under her feet. Eileen then slipped a folded piece of paper deep into the wet mortar when no one was looking. Martha saw her do it, but she didn't tell anyone what it said for decades. Crops failed and grew again. Children left for the cities. The church steeple was replaced twice. The lady never wears out. Martha, in her 70s, brushed away the dust to reveal the paper, still folded and intact. We didn't open it right away because it didn't feel right, but Eileen in her final days asked for it. The letter was simple. If you save our village, we will keep you here forever. Martha smiled when Ethan asked what happened to it. You don't have to see it now. The lady remembers. They paused. Martha turned to him and said, You came here seeking for a story you could explain. But this one isn't about explanations. About a pledge. Ethan looked at Rosary Hill's statue in the late light. From where he sat, it looked less like carved marble and more like something alive, listening, and for the first time since arriving, he wasn't sure which story to believe. The order came down on a Monday morning, crisp and bureaucratic. Proceed with relocation.
No qualifiers, no dilas.
Rosary Hill looked like a staging area by Thursday. 3 cranes towered over the ridge like siege towers, and flatbeds lined the access road. A dozen men in bright vests moved between coils of cable and stacks of lumber, their radios spitting bursts of static. It was the largest crew the town had ever seen. They brought in specialists from Nashville, from Chicago, people who moved lighthouses and relocated Civil War monuments. To them this was just another job. To the people watching from the base of the hill, it felt like an invasion. By 8 a.m. a crowd had gathered. No one shouted. No one waved signs. They just stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes fixed on the summit where the white statue rose above the machinery. The plan was simple on paper. Step 1, cut into the foundation and free the base. Step 2, lift the statue by crane onto a steel platform. Step 3, load onto a reinforced flatbed for transport to its new, more accessible location down by the highway. At 8:15 the first drill hit the foundation. From the base of the hill, the sound was a steady metallic whine, almost swallowed by the wind. But on the ridge, the men felt it differently. The drill stalled at 8:20, not jammed or broken. The bit refused to turn, but the motor roared at full power. Mechanics swarmed the rig, muttering about torque settings and electrical faults. The foreman called for the second drill, which ran for 12 seconds before its bit snapped in half. The crowd at the bottom shifted uncomfortably. The foreman skipped ahead, hooked the crane directly, and saw if the statue would budge without freeing the base. Heavy nylon straps were looped under the lady's outstretched arms and secured with steel shackles large enough to anchor a boat. Hal gave the thumbs up from his operator's seat. The crane groaned, the straps tightened, and the statue moved a fraction of an inch, maybe 2, for the first time in 70 years. The crowd gasped, half in awe, half in dread. Then came the wind. It wasn't a storm wind. There were no dark clouds, no smell of rain. It was a cold, cutting gust from the west, sharp enough to sting exposed skin. The crane shuddered, the straps loosened, and a low, resonant gong sound rolled down the hill. The workers and crowd froze. It came again, 3 deep, slow tolls. No bell stood on that hill, but the sound vibrated the ribs. Hal pushed again, pushing the controls forward. The crane arm lifted half a foot before every console alert lighted up. Overload, hydraulic fault, power surge. The engine died in a black smoke cough. The foreman called for the backup crane. The casing was hot to the touch, and a single bolt of white, blue, and blinding lightning split the sky and slammed into the ground 10 feet from the statue. There had been no thunderheads, no warning, just a sudden surgical strike. James, an ironworker near the impact, was thrown backward and landed hard but conscious, eyes wide, insisting that he'd felt a small, warm hand on his chest before he hit the ground. The foreman didn't ask for another attempt. He ordered every machine powered down and every man off the hill. The cranes, trucks, and crews left deep tire marks in the grass and a few abandoned lengths of cable coiled like shed skin. By dusk, the only soul was the lady. Later that night, as the town settled into uneasy quiet, an unseasonal rain swept through. 15 minutes of steady silver sheets that soaked the streets and shone in the glow of the hilltop candles. In the morning, everything was dry. The cables were gone, the cranes were gone, and the lady stood where she had since spring 1949, arms open, gaze lowered toward the town. The relocation project was not cancelled, but the machinery never returned. Those who were there that day will say they saw a failed engineering job, but the others, those who heard the bell toll, felt the cold wind, and saw lightning fall from a clear blue sky, will say the lady on Rosary Hill said, "Don't try again." After the final attempt, the hill went quiet. Not the kind you notice all at once, but the kind that grows day by day until you realize something is missing. There were no engines, no shouts of men measuring and drilling, no steel cables snaking across the grass, just whine through the maples, the soft crunch of boots from those who still climbed the slope, and the occasional prayer. The developers didn't hold a press conference, the city council didn't announce anything, the relocation date disappeared, and the glossy posters for St. Mary's Spiritual Retreat and Resort began to disappear from store windows. The townspeople heard silence louder than any official statement. In the weeks that followed, life in St. Mary's Creek got back to normal, but the people who had argued for the move no longer talked about opportunity. Some avoided the topic altogether, while others quietly joined the evening walks up Rosary Hill. Ruth Kelly, who had brought lilies to the statue every Friday for decades, noticed something subtle but certain: more footsteps on the path. Not just the older generation but young couples, teenagers, even children clutching their parents' hands. Some came with flowers. Some came merely to stand in the open air beside the lady. Even Ethan Cole changed. When asked why he was still in town weeks after his assignment ended, he said, "Some stories take longer to finish." He began attending nighttime gatherings as a quiet face in the circle, not a reporter. The relocation had been abandoned, but Rosary Hill began to change, not in form but in care. Volunteers leveled and lined the dirt path and lined it with gravel. No one claimed credit for building the small wooden table at the statue's base for flowers and handwritten notes, but everyone used it. Martha Grady, too frail to climb the hill, insisted her niece take her up once a month, sitting in a folding chair and staring at the marble face. "It's not about winning," she told Ethan one afternoon, her voice soft against the wind. "It's about keeping your word." The statue debate had divided the town, but in its quiet aftermath, the hill became less of a landmark and more of a promise renewed. Not just the O'Connells' 1949 vow, but a shared understanding that some things are sacred, not profitable. The lady didn't move, but the people did. Local shops and diner strangers told the story, and others started coming to see her. Some took photos, but many just stood still, as if waiting to hear the bell. One autumn evening, just before sunset, the hill seemed to glow under a wash of golden light. The candles flickered, the maple leaves swayed, and the white marble caught the last rays of the day. In his notebook, Ethan wrote, "It's not that she couldn't be moved, it's that she shouldn't be." The council chamber in town didn't discuss Rosary Hill, and the developers never returned. After filing the project files, even the most ambitious ceased mentioning the resort. For St. Mary's Creek, it was victory enough. For the lady on the hill, it was just another chapter in a generations-long watch. Visitors now talk about the view from the top, the stillness, and how you can almost feel the town breathing beneath you if you stand there long enough. Maybe that's the real miracle. A community that chose to stand still with her. If you're driving the back roads of Kentucky and see a glint of white marble above the tree line, pull over, take a walk, and stand at her feet. You don't need to believe in miracles to understand why she's still there. You just need to listen. If you were moved by this story, like this video, share it with someone who needs a moment of grace, and subscribe to Touched by Grace to not miss the next story where faith, mystery, and tea